from the line. The second year he won MVP, which is extremely difficult to do. So I think he gets caught up in, again, a little bit of the recency bias where it's been a lot of KD. KD is a matchup nightmare. They get in these high-profile games. In the finals, KD looks phenomenal. He's scoring. He's playing defense. Steph's sort of playing second fiddle, but I think Steph opens up so much because he draws so much attention. So to me, I think Steph, when you watch them, he's kind of the cog, I think, that really makes them move. They can go so far. They kind of remind you a little bit of like the Oklahoma City with Durant. Like just Durant alone can get you really, really far. But when you throw Curry into that mix, I think he's the guy that makes them really get to that point where you say, is this one of the best teams of all time? Especially when they're at home. I feel like when he's on, he might be the most exciting player in the league to watch. When he's in that mood where he's like hitting everything.
Not if you're a Cavs fan.
Not if you're a Cavs
not if you're a
fan,
LeBron
no.
fan.
But when he gets in that mode where he's like, you can feel like, okay, it's a heat check time, and he's putting it up from 30, 32 feet, and it's just like raining in. I mean, that thing doesn't even hit a part of the rim. It's going through so clean. I think that's when he's just so fun to watch. So I think from a shooting standpoint, this year, it's just been a lot of injuries, and two of them were kind of freak injuries. He came back versus the Spurs. He hits a layup, flips his ankle. Then JaVale McGee, like a moron, leg whips him and hurts his knee towards the end of the year. And again, I don't even know if he's even 100% healthy now, but, he looked pretty darn good there in game 3. So I think it's easy to say. And again, remember, he's still a shooter. He still shoots about 8 threes a game for his career is what he averages. Guys that are typically shooting the ball a lot from the outside, are going to have a lot of ups and downs in their game just from the way they're shooting. And Steph's a guy that will go to the basket. You saw he finishes very well around the rim. So I think this is a team, though, that, Eric, they just don't care who gets the stats. I mean, they really are a selfless team. You don't ever hear them complaining or, moaning about shots or going to the media. They really don't care. Steph has games. If he has 12, 13 points, you don't hear anything from him, and Durant can go off for 40. And Durant might not have a great game, and Curry goes off, and you hear nothing from him. And it's so rare that you get 3 guys that scores and, really their primary scores, that they really don't seem to care from a statistical standpoint what they do. I think that's phenomenal. I mean, that may be in itself. You brought up the Lakers, which is a team that let their ego get in the way because Shaq and Kobe couldn't get along. And who knows how many titles they could have won together. And I think this team sees that, like, hey, you know what? We do everything so well and we fit together. If we just put our egos aside, we're all going to win titles and all going to go down famous. And I think that's the thing I see that really stands out is Steph goes through highs and lows. You see Clay do it. Durant does it. But they just don't care. Draymond doesn't care if he scores points. They are all about winning when they get to this time of year. And I think that's what makes them so dangerous.
Well, Justin, we're almost to halftime in this game, and we're going to wrap up segment 1 here, but I got to see what you think because the Warriors are beating the Rockets right now just before halftime. James Harden already has 22 points for the Rockets, and they're still not winning the basketball game. So how pivotal, we talked about how pivotal games can be, game 5, let's say, in this Eastern Conference Finals. Switch it over here. I know this is only game 4 in the Western Conference Finals, but Golden State's up 2-1. They're in their own building right now. How do you feel about Golden State winning this game and going up 3-1? Is that pretty much a lock for them? Do you think Houston absolutely must win this game to stay in this series?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they lose this game tonight, do you see this Houston team being able to win 3 straight? Because I sure don't. So I feel like, yeah, at this point, they have to win tonight because, even if they go back home and really shoot the lights out of the gym in Houston in game 5, they're still down a game and Golden State just goes home to close them out. So, tonight is their night here in game 4 that they need to win. Iguodala's out, one of the primary defenders, plays a lot of minutes in that Hampton 5 lineup that Golden State has played so well with. So if Houston can't find a way to win it tonight and make this thing tied back 2-2 and get home court advantage back, if they're down 3-1, Eric, I just don't see a way that they come back in the series.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. The only even potential I see for any devil's advocate argument to that is the way that the NBA style is right now.
Is if you kidnap Steph Curry?
No, I'm not going to do that because I think these games are actually pretty fun to watch, and it is what it is. I'll kidnap Steph Curry when it's the Cavs against the Warriors in the finals, if the Cavs even have a chance to win that series. Maybe if it comes down to like a game 7 or something, then you'll have to look for me on the police blotter. But no, in all seriousness, I think the fact that the series can be separated by 15 or 20 points one way or the other is probably the only hope that Houston would have if they would lose tonight as this game wraps up, go down 3-1. The only hope they can have is that history tells us over the past few years that there's probably going to be 1 or 2 more blowouts going in their favor. So if they can make those 2 blowouts happen in Game 5 and Game 7 in their building, then they've just got to come in to Oracle one more time and play tough. That's the only way I see them winning 3 in a row. But if I had $100 sitting in front of me right now and I was going to, like we said in last week's episode, going to push it over to DraftKings' new sports booking, I'd put it on the Warriors, even at a very low payout, because the Rockets likely could not beat the Warriors 3 in a row.
Well, we'll keep an eye on this game. If there's any updates as we move out of segment 1, we'll be sure to update those. And of course, next week we'll have it all covered. But that's a wrap for segment 1. When we move to segment 2, it's talk-worthy time. Did NASCAR finally hit on a package that's going to bring some excitement back to the racing world? What is up with the NHL? Could there really be an expansion team win the Stanley Cup? And Tom Brady isn't at OTAs. Should we be panicked? And we'll have an update on our 4-man golf scramble from this weekend. That and more when we come back. It's talk-worthy time, and for some of our fans, they were probably watching that Cavaliers Game 3 blowout on Saturday night. I was bouncing back and forth. I had the game up on the iPad, and I had the All-Star race on the big screen because I wanted to see this new NASCAR package that they were going to unveil at the All-Star race. They tried it out last year in the Xfinity Series, had some pretty good races in that, even at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which typically for stock cars doesn't offer great racing. But I got to tell you, Eric, I don't know how much you got to see, but I think NASCAR might be on to something with this package because I thought it was for a 1.5-mile race and even the All-Star race, what we've seen in the last couple of years. I thought it was the best racing that I've seen in quite a while. I thought the 10-lap finish of Stage 3 of the Open was phenomenal racing that, at one point with a few laps to go, there was 8 guys up there fighting for the lead. And really, even in the All-Star race, as good of a car as Kevin Harvick had, he couldn't quite get away from the field. At least you felt like he could be challenged somewhat. They might have a little bit of tweaking to do, but I really liked the direction of what I saw in racing. So do you feel like that is what the sport needs, that this is ultimately good for the sport?
It's going to be hard to say because it's a mixture of 2 opinions on this. The one opinion, which would say this 1.5 mile lack of drama that NASCAR has gotten used to over the past few years as they've improved the downforce on these cars, they just run away in clean air. So for our listeners that aren't as familiar with NASCAR, clean air is when you're out in front, you don't have the turbulent air from the car directly in front of you. In other words, you've got some spacing between you and the car in front of you, or if you're the leader, you don't have a car in front of you. And so that non-turbulent air is just so good for the race car that the lead driver or the lead couple, 2-3 drivers can really pull out and pull away and really never get past. So what NASCAR tried this past weekend was to put a restrictor plate on these engines. Now, restrictor plates are traditionally used mainly as a safety feature at the 2-mile or 2.5-mile super speedways of Daytona and Talladega. And like Justin said in the past at an Xfinity race in Indianapolis, these restrictor plates limit the overall horsepower of the engine by basically creating 4 holes on the top of the manifold to reduce the amount of air that gets to the engine. And so you don't get these cars able to have the breakaway speed that they normally have. What that leads to is very close racing, back and forth, back and forth. It leads to drivers needing to be much more cognizant of what they call airflow over and around the vehicles, something that Dale Earnhardt Sr. was a master at. Being able to draft, being able to use the aero push and the aero pull from getting alongside a guy or getting behind a guy. Long story short on this is that I thought it was a pretty good race as far as if you're a fan and you're just watching racing, because it fixed a lot of the problems that we have said are just ruining the sport with these breakaway guys winning and winning and winning. You know, a Truex Jr. of last year, nothing against Martin at all, but just the fact that that team, that 78 team, figured out a package where they knew if they could get out front with the low downforce car, nobody was going to catch them on a 1.5 mile track. I'm excited about it from that aspect because I think it made for more entertaining racing. I think I saw a stat where in the last year's All-Star Race main event, there was 0 passes for the lead during green flag action. This year, there was 38 passes for the lead, and the way NASCAR measures that is just if a lead changed positions between the timing loops on the transmitters. So they said there was 38 this year. That's a huge, huge difference for the fans sitting in the stands and watching on TV. Now, Justin, that didn't translate into television ratings, but I don't really ding them too much on that because I think you really can't measure that until the news of this type of thing gets out there and fans know ahead of time, oh, they're going to try this again, somewhere else, and then we'll tune in. Because ratings for this year's All-Star race were actually down once again. But the racing on the track was great. I think you're going to find, though, a contingency of people, including drivers, Justin, who feel like this is just one more gimmick in the sport. And we've had a lot of gimmicks over the last 10 years.
There may be a lot of fans that think that way, but I think, again, if the racing is good and the product that you're putting out there is good, you start to get some close finishes and you get guys coming to the line. Harvick won his first race, and those races at Atlanta where you actually have to go get a photo to see who actually won, and you're trying to freeze frame it, things like that. Those are the type of things I think that will ultimately get the sport more notoriety and bring fans back. Because if you've been a fan of the sport and you've invested the time over the last 3, 5, 7 years watching this All-Star race, Eric, there hasn't been anything to watch. Kyle Busch and Kurt Busch wrecking each other was, 10, 12 years ago? Those things haven't been happening in the All-Star race. They've been, trying to gimmick these races up as much as possible. And whoever starts on the front row gets the whole shot, takes off, and then runs off with it. If they can actually start to find a package that can bring close racing back and bring back the sport to a level where you're, just like we see in the playoffs. These playoff games in the NBA have sucked. But do you want to be the one person that sits in your group of friends at work or on your text thread or whatever and not know what's going on in them just because you think they're bad games? No, you still want to be able to talk about them. Nobody in your group, though, a lot of times are talking about NASCAR because no one really cares about it because they don't feel like it's something that's on their radar. But if the sport starts to have close finishes, that's going to lead to more rivalry, more hard racing, more hurt feelings. Then you start to build up your fan base back. And I think that's what NASCAR is going to need. And it's going to take time, Eric. They had so many 1.5 mile tracks and so many just bad races, frankly, that for 3 hours were just horrible to watch. And they were dependent on a, debris caution with 20 to go, hoping that the double file restarts would bring some kind of excitement, that they ran a lot of fans off. So the ratings aren't going to reflect it for a while. It's going to have to be, the Michigans and the Californias and Pocono where these races just aren't very good races until something happens late, or you almost feel like NASCAR's trying to gimmick it up, or you're praying that, someone brushes the wall just so you can get a caution to see if something exciting happens so you feel like you didn't just waste the last 2.5, 3 hours of your day for a blowout.
Justin, you and I are fans of NASCAR, and I'm telling you, we could fix this sport in about 5 minutes. We'll get into that in a different show because I think it would make for a neat segment. 2 or 3 ideas that you and I have that could probably solve this sport's problems immediately. But if this is the route they want to go, the only advice I give them is don't launch it until you're really ready. And once you do launch it, I say you just go all out and do it at all the 1.5 miles. The things I'm reading this week are really making me nervous because they're talking about, okay, well, let's try it maybe over at this track, and then let's try it over at this track. And then, no. If you want, everything that you said is correct. If you want to drive fans away, keep doing what you're doing and also keep adding all of these little things, the rule changes, gimmicks, everything along the way. Because not only is the downforce package driving fans away in the sense that, like you said, they're seeing 3 or 4 hours of really boring racing a lot of times, but all of the changes have driven all of the crowd that used to cheer for Bobby Labonte and Terry Labonte and Rusty Wallace and Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Jeff Gordon and on and on and on. Those fans are gone because the NASCAR as a sport is absolutely nothing like they used to know it.